All right, y'all. Welcome back to the show. It's Antiwar Radio. I'm Scott Horton. And, I don't know, man, if it's just because I was raised on Star Wars the way I was or what, but I got a lot of heroes. And, well, geez, my job is getting heroes on the phone all day, so I guess it's not that much of a surprise. But anyway, one of them is Andy Worthington. His website is andyworthington.co.uk, and he's the author of the book, The Guantanamo Files, the stories of 759 detainees in America's illegal prison. And he also made a movie called Outside the Law, Stories from Guantanamo, which I still haven't had a copy of yet after more than a year. Something, and my head's going to explode. Welcome back to the show, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm all right, Scott, apart from feeling slightly guilty that I haven't got a copy of the film to you yet. But, yeah, I'm good.
For somebody, one of these guys' sakes, give me a freaking DVD, man. I want to watch it.
I'll do that.
You pick your innocent Guantanamo prisoner for whose sake we'll name that in. All right, anyway. So the reason I always turn to you, Andy, as many people in the audience know, is because there are no Americans who did the work. That was why a Brit had to step in and say, all right, that's it. I mean, not that you're not an individual or anything, but you live way over there on the other side of the ocean. And so Andy, basically everybody, he had to say, all right, that's it. I guess I'll have to do the work then. And he did the work. And he profiled every single prisoner at Guantanamo Bay with every single fact he could possibly find about them. And he now has this update, which is incredibly important. I'm not sure where all it ran, but I know that you can find it at andyworthington.co.uk. I should mention you can find Andy at the Future Freedom Foundation site, fff.org, of course at antiwar.com, I believe at Truthout, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And a couple other places. Name them if you want there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm working for Caged Prisoners here in the UK, which is headed up by Mozam Beg, former Guantanamo prisoner. And it's in conjunction with them that I'm doing this 8-part list at the moment that you just mentioned there of the stories of the remaining prisoners in Guantanamo. That's 174 men as we speak.
All right. Now, I don't know if this was really exactly the way you English people called it. It's certainly a tradition that we've abandoned here. The whole innocent until proven guilty thing. So I was wondering if you could tell us, are there any of these men that you presume are guilty? Perhaps Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Qahtani, Ramzi bin al-Shibh. How many actual friends of Zawahiri are locked up in that place at all? Andy, do you know?
Well, I don't know, obviously, because it's not possible, I don't think, really, to ascertain what people actually may have done until it goes in front of some independent arbiter. And the closest that we've got to that, really, is the district court in Washington, D.C., where judges have been going through these men's habeas corpus petitions for the last 2 years. But, even there, where they've said in 3/4 of the cases just about that they've come across that the government has failed to establish its supposed evidence, there's a fight back going on in the D.C. Circuit Court now, the government appealing these and coming up against a bunch of judges who you could imagine sitting down for dinner with Dick Cheney any day of the week, who believe that the government shouldn't really require much in the way of evidence to continue detaining people without charge or trial at Guantanamo. But to speculate from what we know of the stories of the prisoners as they've been presented, then there were 14 high-value detainees who were moved into Guantanamo from secret CIA prisons in September 2006, and those include the people that we can routinely describe as the genuine bad guys, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi bin al-Shibh, who were on record as boasting of their involvement in the 9/11 plot before they were seized, and some other men, who may also fit this description, although I'm not entirely convinced that all 14 are people who they're supposed to be. And one of them in particular, Abu Zubaydah, who was described as Al-Qaeda's number 3. The CIA torture program was developed for him in 2002, And it turns out that he was actually the mentally damaged gatekeeper for a training camp in Afghanistan that had little to do with Al-Qaeda.
Uh-huh. All right, well, now hold on a sec there, because there's a couple things. First of all, isn't it the case that at a habeas corpus hearing in one of these federal courts, as mandated by the Supreme Court, these guys get one shot? That's still just about the lowest standard of evidence possible, basically equivalent to, does the cop have the right to open your trunk if he feels like it or something, right? This is, the burden of proof is on them, or at least the burden on the state to show that there's a reason to believe that they want to keep holding this person is the most minimal kind of standard of evidence, right? Not like a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt or anything.
No, the basis is very low. As in fact, a lawyer friend of mine told me the other day, it only determines whether there's probable cause for detaining someone, not that the person has actually done anything wrong.
Okay, and then
that's how low the standard of evidence is.
Right, and so that's the whole thing, is that they barely have to prove to the judge anything, and yet they continue to fail, and that's the Bush and now the Obama Justice Departments continue to fail to make their case that they have any reason whatsoever to keep these people, mostly, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's a good reason for that, obviously. Which is that, what purports to be the evidence in so many cases is actually, information that was derived through the torture of the prisoners or of other prisoners, or multiple levels of hearsay that, that nobody standing back objectively from it can really credit, because it's just too vague. It's too vague and it's too unreliable.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, this is more of just an assertion rather than a question, although you can comment on it however you like, but Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who was basically Smithers to Colin Powell, no offense, Larry, he's a good guy now, and he's repented in a very sincere way, and, I think redeemed himself quite well since the bad old days of 2003. But anyway, he completely concurred with what you just said, and said that, look, the fact that they closed down at least some of the secret prisons and brought actual Al-Qaeda guys to Guantanamo Bay was basically, that's all you needed to know to prove to you that the guys who were already at Guantanamo were nobodies. That whole thing was a big PR show to keep everybody scared of orange jumpsuits and orange alerts and, keep our minds in a state of fear for the Iraq War, when anybody who was, Ramzi bin al-Shibh or something was being tortured in a dungeon deep underground in Thailand somewhere. Yeah.
Well, definitely, that's partly true. I think it wasn't just meant to be a sideshow. It also demonstrates, to put it bluntly, the arrogance and stupidity of the Bush administration, that they were propelled by their presumption of the guilt of the people that they were capturing, rather than analyzing it and working out that if you are working with unreliable warlords, if you are handing out colossal amounts of money, if you are working with and supposed to be trusting the Pakistani government, and the men that are coming into your custody, you're being told these are all these Al-Qaeda and Taliban guys, then you ought to be thinking twice about whether there's any truth to that. But their presumption was not. Their presumption was that they were behaving in the kind of macho way that was required in this war on terror, and that the traditional safeguards and checks on whether you were actually capturing people that you needed to or not were unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that was the thing, right? The military already had a battlefield process for determining who was who, and they completely abandoned that, put hoods on everybody, and just shipped them off.
Yeah, exactly.
And then by the time the guards at Guantanamo, they're all 19 or whatever, have a brain full of whatever their football coach told them. They don't know. They show up, and here comes a plane full of terrorists. And
exactly.
I remember, I forget which one it was, but I interviewed a couple of Guantanamo guards on this show, and one of them talked about what it was like the day that they showed up and how scary they were, and how the guys, here they are in shackles and chains and hoods, and yet the guards were scared of them, like they could just blow up at any time and kill us all, and they believed